disruptions. Inflation is like a leaky faucet in your house. Just as a small drip from a faucet can turn into a big problem if left unchecked, inflation can slowly and steadily erode the value of your money over time. It's the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and it can have a huge impact on economies all around the world. Now, different countries can experience inflation in different ways, depending on a variety of factors such as government policies, exchange rates, and supply and demand. For example, some countries may experience high inflation due to a shortage of goods or services, while others may experience it due to excessive money supply or government spending. In Argentina, for instance, inflation has been a persistent problem for years, with prices skyrocketing and people struggling to afford basic necessities. In recent years, the government has attempted to implement various measures to combat inflation, but it remains a major challenge for the country's economy. Meanwhile, in the United States, inflation has been on the rise in recent months, with prices for goods and services increasing at the fastest rate in over a decade. This has led to concerns about the impact on consumers' purchasing power, as well as on the overall health of the economy. And it's not just developing or developed countries that are affected by inflation. Inflation can also have a significant impact on emerging markets, such as India or Brazil. In Brazil, for example, inflation has been rising steadily over the past year due to factors such as supply chain disruptions and rising energy prices. This has made it more difficult for the country to achieve economic growth and stability. Inflation can be a complex and challenging issue to tackle, and it can have a wide-ranging impact on economies and people's lives. It's important to understand how inflation works, why it happens, and what measures can be taken to combat it. Why does it seem like some countries never have issues with inflation? Japan is one of the most famous examples of countries that have managed to keep inflation under check. Despite experiencing some economic difficulties in the 1990s, Japan has managed to keep its inflation rate at an average of around 1% for the last few decades. So, how did they do it? Well, there are a few factors at play here. Firstly, Japan has a strong central bank, the Bank of Japan, which is responsible for managing monetary policy. This means that they have control over the money supply and can adjust interest rates to keep inflation under control. Secondly, Japan has a culture of saving, which means that people tend to hold on to their money rather than spending it. This helps to keep demand for goods and services low, which in turn keeps prices stable. Another country that has managed to keep inflation under control is Germany. Germany has had a relatively low inflation rate for the last few decades, despite experiencing some economic turmoil in the early 2000s. One of the key reasons for this is that Germany has a strong manufacturing industry, which means that they can export a lot of goods and services to other countries. This helps to boost the economy and keep inflation under control. In addition to this, Germany has a strong fiscal policy, which means that they are careful with their spending and manage their public debt effectively. This helps to reduce the risk of inflation, as the government is not creating too much new money to fund its spending. Switzerland, on the other hand, has had a remarkably low inflation rate for decades, hovering around 0.1% annually. One of the reasons for this is the country's strong currency, the Swiss franc, which is considered a safe haven asset and is in high demand globally. The Swiss National Bank, the country's central bank, has been successful in managing the money supply and keeping interest rates low to support the economy, while also maintaining price stability. Another factor that has contributed to Switzerland's low inflation is its strong focus on innovation and competitiveness. The country has a highly skilled workforce and invests heavily in research and development, which helps to drive productivity and economic growth. This, in turn, keeps prices stable and inflation low. Switzerland also has a relatively low level of public debt compared to other developed countries. This means that the government is not borrowing excessively to fund its spending, which reduces the risk of inflation. So as we can see, a combination of factors has helped Switzerland maintain low inflation. A strong currency, effective monetary policy, a focus on innovation and competitiveness, and a responsible fiscal policy are all key ingredients in the recipe for success. Can other countries simply emulate their policies to prevent inflation? While countries like Japan and Germany have been successful in keeping inflation under control, it's not as simple as just emulating their policies. Every country has unique economic, political, and cultural factors that affect its ability to manage inflation. For example, let's take a look at China. China has managed to keep inflation under control for many years, but the policies they've implemented may not work in other countries. One of the key ways that China has kept inflation low is by keeping its currency, the yuan, artificially low in value. This has made their exports cheaper and more competitive on the global market, which has helped to boost the economy and keep inflation low. However, this policy would not work in a country like the United States, where the economy is much more diverse and the currency is the world's reserve currency. Keeping the value of the US dollar artificially low could lead to a loss of confidence in the currency, which could have disastrous consequences for the global economy. Another example is Brazil. Brazil has struggled with inflation for many years, with rates often reaching double digits. The Brazilian government has implemented various policies to try and control inflation, such as raising interest rates and implementing price controls on certain goods. However, these policies have not always been effective, and inflation remains a major issue for the country. One of the reasons why these policies may not work in Brazil is that the country has a complex tax system that makes it difficult for businesses to operate efficiently. This has led to high costs and inefficiencies in the economy, which can contribute to inflation. Additionally, Brazil's economy is heavily reliant on commodities like oil and soybeans, which are subject to price fluctuations on the global market. This makes it difficult for the government to control prices and keep inflation under control. So, what can we conclude from these examples? It's clear that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to managing inflation. Each country must take into account its unique economic, political, and cultural factors when implementing policies to keep inflation under control. Some policies may work in certain countries but not in others, depending on the specific circumstances. In the case of the United States, the Federal Reserve has been successful in managing inflation through a combination of monetary and fiscal policies. The Federal Reserve uses interest rates and other tools to control the money supply and keep inflation low. Additionally, the U.S. has a diverse economy that is less reliant on commodities and more reliant on services and technology, which can help to keep inflation under control. What prices do other countries have to pay to cut inflation to the barest minimum? Curbing inflation is a complex process that requires a combination of monetary, fiscal, and structural policies. While the specific policies that countries implement may vary depending on their unique circumstances, there are some steps that can generally be taken to control inflation. One of the key ways that countries can curb inflation is by implementing prudent monetary policies. Central banks can adjust interest rates and other monetary policy tools to manage the money supply and keep inflation under control. For example, if inflation is rising too quickly, the central bank can raise interest rates to make borrowing more expensive, which can reduce consumer spending and help bring inflation back down. Fiscal policies can also play a role in controlling inflation. Governments can implement measures such as reducing government spending, increasing taxes, and reducing subsidies to help reduce inflationary pressures. Also, structural policies such as labor market reforms and increased competition can help to reduce production costs and prevent inflation from getting out of control. However, it's worth noting that there are potential costs associated with curbing inflation. For example, raising interest rates or reducing government spending can lead to slower economic growth and higher unemployment rates. Additionally, some policies may be difficult to implement in countries with certain socio-cultural differences, such as a lack of political stability or weak rule of law. Curbing inflation requires a combination of monetary, fiscal, and structural policies tailored to a country's unique circumstances. While there are steps that can generally be taken to control inflation, there may be potential costs associated with these policies. Ultimately, each country must carefully consider its options and weigh the price of cutting down inflation against the potential benefits.